Have you ever looked at a religion from the outside and thought, this feels a bit like a cult? That idea might sound extreme to some people. To others, it's a question they've quietly wondered for years but never had the space to explore. So today, let's take a long, honest look at this idea. Are religions just big cults? And if they are, what does that mean? To start with, let's strip away the emotional reactions and look at what a cult actually is. Most people hear the word cult and immediately think of something dark and dangerous. They picture a charismatic leader controlling people's minds, cutting them off from their families, asking for money, obedience, and sometimes even violence. That's the image we've been given by documentaries and news stories. But at its core, the word cult comes from the Latin cultus, meaning worship or reverence. In the modern sense, though, cults are usually described as small, tightly controlled groups with authoritarian leadership, absolute belief systems, and a tendency to isolate themselves from the outside world. Now let's think about religions, not the abstract ideas or personal beliefs, but the organized systems, the institutions, the hierarchy, the rules, the rituals. When you start to break it down, many organized religions actually share a lot of the same characteristics we associate with cults. Let's start with leadership. Cults typically revolve around a single charismatic figure, someone who claims special knowledge or divine connection. Now look at religion. Whether it's a prophet, a messiah, a guru, or a founder, religions usually begin with a central figure who claims to have access to a higher truth. And this figure's words are taken as sacred, unquestionable, even centuries later. Their teachings become the foundation for the entire belief system. Their followers are taught not just to respect them, but to revere them. Often, disobedience isn't just seen as disrespect. It's seen as sinful, dangerous, or even punishable in this life or the next. Then there's control. Cults often have strict rules about behavior, diet, dress, relationships, and even thoughts. They tell members how to live, what's acceptable, and what's not. Sound familiar? Major religions have entire books of laws and commandments. They prescribe what you can eat, who you can marry, what you can wear, how you should speak, what you should think, and who you should associate with. These rules are usually enforced not just socially, but morally. Break them, and you're told you've offended not just people, but God. Another common trait in cults is isolation. Cults often discourage relationships with outsiders. They might tell members that the outside world is corrupt, dangerous, or evil. They create an us versus them mentality. Many religions do this too, even if subtly. You're told that non-believers are lost, immoral, or even enemies of the faith. People are often warned not to question or associate too closely with those outside the religion, especially if they hold different beliefs. This isolation doesn't always happen physically, but psychologically, it can be just as strong. You're taught to separate yourself in your thinking, in your lifestyle, in your sense of identity. Now let's talk about indoctrination. Cults are known for intense indoctrination, especially from a young age. They repeat the same ideas over and over until those ideas feel like facts. This happens in religions too. Children are taught religious stories before they even learn to read. They memorize prayers and rituals without understanding them. They're told these things are true, not because of evidence, but because tradition says so. They grow up surrounded by a community that all believes the same thing, reinforcing the idea that it must be true, because everyone around them believes it too. And here's another important point. Cults discourage questioning. Critical thinking is often seen as rebellion. Doubt is treated as weakness. Faith is praised as a virtue. Sound familiar? In many religious settings, asking the wrong questions can get you shunned, punished, or even labeled a heretic. There's often this unwritten rule. You're allowed to explore, but only within the framework of the religion. Step outside that framework. Start questioning the foundations, and suddenly you're a problem. Financial control is another hallmark of cult behavior. Cults often demand money from their followers, sometimes everything they have. Religion does this too, sometimes directly, through tithes or donations, sometimes indirectly, by pressuring followers to give in the name of righteousness. Some religious institutions have amassed enormous wealth, even while many of their followers live in poverty. Think about that. Billion-dollar religious empires, built on the donations of people who believe giving is a sacred duty. That's not just about generosity. That's about power. Speaking of power, one of the strongest tools both cults and religions use is fear. Fear of punishment. Fear of the outside world. Fear of judgment. Fear of eternal consequences. In cults, members are often told that leaving will destroy their lives. They're threatened with curses, bad luck, or hellish outcomes. Religions do the same. The idea of hell, for instance, is one of the most powerful psychological weapons ever invented. The message is clear: believe this, obey this, follow this, or face unimaginable consequences. Not just for this life, but for all eternity. Let's look at some real-world examples. Scientology is often labeled a cult. It has a strict hierarchy, secret teachings, a powerful central figure, intense financial demands, and aggressive efforts to silence critics. But compare that to the Catholic Church, or to fundamentalist Islam, or to evangelical megachurches. The structure, the behavior, the control, it's all there, just on a much larger scale. And that's what makes this comparison so interesting. What we call a cult is often just a small religion. And what we call a religion is often just a cult that got big enough to be accepted. The only real difference is numbers. If a group has a few hundred people and strange beliefs, we call it a cult. But if it has millions of people and a long history, we call it a religion. Think about that. We don't judge the truth of the beliefs, we judge how normal they feel. And normal doesn't mean true. It just means familiar. Take a step back and ask yourself, if someone came to you today and said, "I've received a message from God. I wrote it down. It's the truth. You have to follow it. If you don't, you'll be punished forever." You'd probably be skeptical. You might even think they're delusional. But that's exactly how every major religion started. A person, a vision, a book, a set of rules. And over time, enough people believed it that it stopped sounding strange. In fact, the biggest religions today often started as cults. Christianity was once a small, persecuted sect in the Roman Empire. Islam began with a single man preaching in Mecca. Buddhism, Hinduism, Mormonism, all of them began as minority beliefs that slowly gained followers, influence, and eventually power. That's what changes everything: power. Once a belief system gains enough political, social, or cultural power, it becomes legitimized. It gets temples, governments, armies, tax exemptions, holidays, and respect. But the core behavior, the control, the authority, the absolute claims, often stays the same. It's just now called a faith instead of a cult. There's also the emotional hook. Cults manipulate emotions to bind people. They offer love, acceptance, meaning, purpose. So do religions. They tell you you're special, that you're chosen, that you have a place in a cosmic plan, that suffering has meaning, that death isn't the end. These are incredibly powerful messages, especially for people who feel lost, afraid, or disconnected. It's not just belief. It's belonging. That's why it's so hard to walk away. Even if someone starts to doubt the ideas, they might still cling to the community, the comfort, the identity. That's not weakness. It's human nature. People want connection. They want certainty. They want to feel safe. And religions, like cults, are very good at offering those things, at a price. So, are religions just big cults? Technically, not all of them fit the strict sociological definition of a cult, but many of them use the same tools, the same techniques, and the same structures. The main difference is that they've been around longer and have more followers. But does time make something true? Does popularity make something moral? Or does it just make it harder to question? At the end of the day, maybe the question isn't whether religions are cults. Maybe the question is, why do we let some belief systems get a free pass just because they're old and popular? Why do we teach children to accept things we'd never believe if someone told us the same story today? Why do we call one group crazy and another holy when they act in almost the same ways? Maybe it's time we stop using labels and start looking at behavior. Control is control, whether it's done by 10 people or 10 million. Manipulation is manipulation, whether it's in a basement or a cathedral. And truth? Truth doesn't change based on how many people believe it. It stands or falls on its own. Thanks for watching. If you found this thought-provoking, share your views in the comments. Let's keep asking questions, even the uncomfortable ones.